Hello, I'm Joshua.
And I'm Leah.
And we would like to thank you for listening to the Reasonably Prepared podcast,
a preparedness resource for the complete beginner.
We are here to help you on your preparedness journey
without the paranoia, fear, and doomsday often associated with preparedness.
If you find our podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a comment letting us know. And now, on to the show. Once again, good morning to you, beautiful wife.
Good morning.
Awesome. Welcome to the Ground Zero, first ever. We're calling it episode 0 as opposed to the first episode of Reasonably Prepared podcast and moving forward YouTube channel.
Sounds good. I'm awake. I'm here.
Awesome. So we've been talking about this. Oh, got this thing. We've been talking about this for quite some time. I think I instigated the conversation, which is typical. I'm the one mouthing off dreams all the time, but I'm grateful that this one is
pretty typical.
Come to fruition. I did that on purpose. The slurp. So having the mic here does accentuate the slurp, and I will not do it anymore. But man, holy crap, it is much louder. I didn't realize it was that loud.
Yeah. That's pretty annoying.
Okay, so Reasonably Prepared podcast. We've been discussing we've been working on preparedness. Can I say most of our marriage, or certainly for the last 10 years?
I think our preparedness journey started with our camping trip to Louisiana over Y2K.
That's right. Now, go ahead.
We got out of Houston because we were nervous about what might happen in the city.
Right.
And we went camping out in the woods with some other people.
Well, Isaiah was there
for Y2K.
Right. And I want to say that was the very beginning stages of, and I know we weren't like terrified. We were just like, hey, look, if something happens and the news is semi-right, we'll be out on property and we'll be camping. And so we'll be able to kind of group from there if something does happen in the city. Excuse me. But if it doesn't, then we're just on a fun camping trip.
Right. Well, and I remember it must have not been too far out in the woods because there was a light.
Right. And we kept staring at it.
And we kept watching it because we knew that if that light went out, then it was true. The whole grid would be down, just like everybody had been predicting.
Right.
But it stayed on.
The
little light kept twinkling.
And to be fair, we didn't have oodles and oodles of food and ammo and.
No, I mean, to be honest, I think we would have made it like the one day, New Year's Day.
Yeah, we just wouldn't have been in the city if something went down.
True,
because we lived in the city,
downtown Houston.
Yeah, crazy in the city, big city, and so I guess that is or at least the beginning ideas.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
We were kids. You were 19. I was 23 or 24. Mm-hmm. And so we had the idea, but then, of course, I was raised with some amount of preparedness ideology or mentality from my mom and dad, although they were not as into it as they are now by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But yeah, you're right. I think so. It began there and carried through. I mean, I'm trying to look back now and remember the last 20 years of marriage. There's a defined line a decade ago where we kind of made the conscious effort that we're going to put into practice some of the things we'd been thinking or talking about.
Yeah.
And so, when we purchased our own first home and it was our own, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Even though in most of our rentals, we usually always had extra water, a little bit of extra food sometimes.
Right. So it's been, we'll just say it's safe to say it's been at least 20 years in the making, and the last decade has been a lot of educating ourselves and actually implementing and putting into practice how our own philosophies and the way we feel, instead of being doomsday folks, just being, once again, reasonably prepared, to be prepared with pragmatically, if you will.
Right.
And so why are we talking into two microphones today then? You know, or we'll start with, what is this? What are we doing here? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah. So given the last decade of actively working on preparedness, we've come to form, you know, relationships with our community, but we've become kind of the go-to people for beginners, right?
Yes, for absolute beginners.
Yeah, because I think we're approachable enough, and we're not so doomsday-ish
Right.
that people feel comfortable coming and asking us for advice when it comes to things like preparedness, education, you know, the country living also. Because we invite people into our home so much, I think they're super duper comfortable with it, and so we are jumping in to start a podcast and YouTube channel with the same name, Reasonably Prepared.
Yeah.
To give information, philosophy, dialogue for the absolute beginner who feels like they want to be, who feels like they need to be and want to be and should be prepared to some degree, but have no earthly idea how to start.
Right. And they don't want to necessarily, or they're not interested in building bunkers.
Right.
And preparing for zombies, you know.
Right. Or they're overwhelmed by that idea, you know, because if you go, I mean, the truth is, there is some, you know, beginner preparedness stuff. I feel like the internet is lacking in it. It's almost all hardcore, doomsday, militarized, mostly guy perspective, lots of ammo, bunkers, explosions, ridiculous amounts of food, alcohol, and very niche scenarios. Right?
Yeah, very specific. This particular family or group is only prepared for if the grid goes down or if there's an EMP.
Yeah. You know, or fire ravages everything. Actually, I want to say even very little practical, like fire comes through or hurricanes come through. It's almost all EMP.
It's a doomsday scenarios,
Yeah,
apocalyptic
the dollar's collapsing.
Serious. Yeah.
Right.
Which, to be fair, I'm not necessarily downing that. You know.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
But
you can't go from 0 to 100 instantly. Right. So even if you and I, as we've educated ourselves, have realized, okay, some of these things are possibilities, and the deeper you get into, say, politics, that's not just right in the politics and economic policy, and even your local politics or just your local events and weather.
Right.
You realize, okay, some of these things have the possibility of happening. And if you look at history, they have happened throughout history. But to go from 0 to Weimar Republic instantly and try to prepare for that is daunting and overwhelming and not necessary.
I don't think it's necessary, no. Not to.
No, it's not at all. So we decided together that we're going to start a podcast and YouTube channel for the complete beginner, giving our instruction and philosophy on preparedness. So I just read that, but yeah, that's it in a nutshell. It's our hope to put out audio and video content. So the video content will be on YouTube, and I guess we'll have some sort of website to land on eventually. But we'll be putting it on YouTube, and that's more instructional videos, things that we do, physically showing that are short instructional videos to some degree.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the podcast will be a slightly longer format to kind of unpack the whys and the philosophies and open discussion, just to make it a little bit easier for some people to consume or digest.
Right. And it'll also be a platform where we can invite other people that maybe have interesting perspectives or know more about a specific topic than we do. And they can kind of bring some extra instruction.
Yeah.
So,
So between putting out content and then to use the content to build a community of people.
Yeah.
So that where we feel comfortable, where it's not an echo chamber of doomsday things of that nature.
Right.
And the hope in hopes to empower people who and give them the tools they need to move forward to safely and peacefully serve their families and their communities, right? And we can build the community kind of around that, as opposed to, once again, the prevailing message of doom and gloom preparedness. So that's what we're going to be doing, and we even touched a little bit right there on why. It's our heart to serve. We can sit around in our chairs and talk about politicians this and people that, and if only someone did this, and people need to blank, and I think if we do that, we grow more and more cynical and narcissistic. And our heart is to invite people into our home and our thought process and have conversation with them and help and serve. Certainly,
Yeah.
Certainly, most of our marriage has been, our home has been a invite. We've invited people in, and we're open in community. I don't know how else would you describe it. I don't know.
I think we're just more interested in relationships, building relationships with
100%.
people. I want to talk with people. I want to find out where you're at. In fact, in a way, this is a little trickier because we are talking to people that we don't know. And that is a little trickier because you're trying to cover lots of different topics that you think other will be helpful, when really I would love to just sit down with each individual person and say, okay, where are you at? What's your philosophy on this? How do you feel about this?
I.e. each individual listener.
Right. Yes. Each individual listener. Yes.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
so, and we can approach it as though we are.
Yeah.
As we bring people in.
Sure. And every podcast is going to be tailored to a more specific listener, something
Sure.
that a particular listener might not be interested in one particular podcast, but another episode might really speak to them.
Right.
That happens a lot. So.
Right. We felt strongly that we have a lot of practical knowledge and skills when it comes to preparedness ideas, and have actually physically lived through it. We've done it. It's not, for us, it hasn't just been a theoretical, well, one day there's this, so we're building this infrastructure because blank could happen.
Right.
We've basically been evacuated, or as close to evacuated as you can, without actually like having to leave our town or anything like that. I think at least twice because of fire when we were living in Northern California.
Right.
And have been put to the test with that.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Our scenario right now is a little different. For the first time in a very long time, we're actually living in a city environment.
Right.
And so this is a little bit of a new environment where we are learning more preparedness in a city setting.
Right.
So there's some interesting challenges with that.
That differ greatly from how we have been.
Right. So most of our preparedness experience and knowledge comes from living in a very rural setting on 14 acres in Northern California.
With almost no immediate neighbors.
Correct. And so that's most of our preparedness experience, and now we're learning how to adapt that experience and knowledge to a city-type environment.
Right.
But we've encountered quite a few interesting scenarios.
Oh, yeah, that we've had to endure and roll through.
Yeah, we've gone 3 days without water.
Well, I mean, with 3 days, zero production, almost a week's worth of, for all intents and purposes, having no water.
Well, no water. You turn on the tap. This was
Dry.
during the drought in California
Right.
this would have been 2014, 13 probably, 2012, 2013, when California was still in drought. And it was not uncommon by August to open the tap and no water comes out.
At all.
Nothing.
Right. And so we would plan for, we actually, the ironic part is we even planned for that idea. At that time, I believe we had the rainwater harvest system. I want to say it was 2,500 gallons of rainwater harvest that I'd installed. But when you're actually put to the test and the water runs out for real, and you mentally have to push through, it becomes a whole different story.
Yeah,
When
it
you're
is.
physically having to do it versus, oh, I'll just do this.
Yeah. And we'll definitely be talking a lot about that in further episodes about the mental and psychological impact of preparedness. I don't think that's talked about enough. I think it's downplayed or maybe even just glossed over because a lot of times people prepare for things, but they've never actually gone through that scenario, or they've never forced themselves to go through that scenario to test it. So because of that, you are not aware of the mental blocks that you're going to experience when that happens. So there is a mental shift that happens when you open that tap and no water comes out.
Yeah.
And
I want to say it was twofold. Number one, it was the personal mental block, right? The personal mental. And then relational. Because when you're dealing with relational dynamic in a stressful situation, it feels like the relationship changes almost, right? Something happens.
Right.
And so that's part of it. And to share our experiences, this is just two we're talking about. Actually, there were many, from personal defense, people being on our property. And now that we're in the city and we're beginning to reevaluate our preparedness, check the holes in our game and start to redo it, we thought, hey, let's invite everyone else along for the process.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we already have friends and acquaintances who are contacting us. Hey, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? They might contact me about, I don't want an entire arsenal, but I want to own a firearm. What do I do? How do I do that? Hey, do I buy a bunch of camping equipment and just make sure that I've got and so instead of just interacting with each person one-on-one, which is wildly inefficient and doesn't give a broader spectrum, boom, podcast and YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And to distill it down, we have a heart, you and I both have a heart that in our home, in our lives, in our marriage, in our family, that we bring other people peace, that we fight for peace. And so I think that's the fundamental reason why we even are drawn to the idea of being even somewhat prepared is to bring order from chaos and to bring peace into tumultuous times, right? So if people are wildly stressed out and they don't know what to do, being even somewhat prepared kind of buys you at some amount of peace, right?
Yeah, to some extent, it certainly does. It also, once again, bringing the idea of the mental and psychological impact of a stressful situation or of an emergency situation. If you've prepared beforehand, not just by collecting things and organizing things, but also by performing simple drills or knowing exactly where to find things, these things become rote. And so in an emergency situation, the idea is that you would just simply default to what you've been practicing. You would go straight to what you own and what you have.
Right.
It would be very well organized and clearly labeled and marked, and you would know where everything is. And that's going to buy you time. That's going to buy you sanity or peace, as you're saying.
Yeah.
And more of a feeling of, okay, everybody take a deep breath. This is for real. Let's look at what we've got and let's go.
Yeah.
Or let's handle this, however we're going to handle it, whether it's leaving, staying, it doesn't matter. It's just, we have a system in place. Let's follow our system. Whereas when you don't have a system, it's absolute chaos. I'm reminded of your old boss who told us the story of being stuck in Northern California during one of the greatest fires that they had experienced at that time.
The fountain fires, right?
Yeah, the fountain fires. And he saw the fire coming up over the hill, and the fire personnel are there yelling at everybody to get out, get out, get out. And he's by himself. His wife and kids son was gone. And I just remember him laughing a little bit to himself, but telling the part of the story where he just panicked and grabbed a bag and just grabbed the first things out of his son's dresser drawer.
He basically said he grabbed the first two drawers.
Right.
He just grabbed
well,
the first
later he opened the bag and realized he only grabbed a bunch of underclothes, underwear, socks, and t-shirts, and half of it was stuff that his son had outgrown. It didn't even fit him.
Yeah.
So it was absolutely worthless, and that is what you want to avoid.
Right. And this is not, once again, a parent. They lost their whole home.
Yeah, their entire house burned down to the ground.
Right.
It was bad.
So it's not like he was panicked for no reason. The flames were in his yard.
Right.
Came up over the hill in his yard, and he had to get out as fast as possible. And later on, as he's telling us the story, and half joking because it was 15 years later, he would say, and they do now. Now they have full system in place for if they get evacuated, what they're going to do. But it took having their house burnt to the ground and losing their 40 acres to do it.
Right. And I mean, that'll do it. We learn a lot through experience. And I guarantee that, if that happened to me too, I'd definitely have a system in place at that point. But you don't want to wait till then.
Right.
You want to do what you can to be reasonably and generally prepared. What was that saying that you used to say all the time? We can't be prepared for everything. No. But we can prepare for anything.
You know what? We're going to continue to go over and rehash a lot of our mantras.
Yeah.
And we'll go over them. And so to go back just a little bit, our heart is to serve and bring peace and order from chaos, and serve people who are afraid and intimidated, and just have nice conversation to create an inviting environment, because we believe indeed that some amount of preparedness is very important. For number one, some of the reasons we just talked about. But you know what? I mean, even say biblically Joseph, God kind of placed him to do this exact thing for an entire nation. And we can take that model, the Joseph idea, and apply that to our own families, to our own selves, so that in chaos, so this will kind of segue nicely into, why on earth, not why are we doing this, but why even consider preparedness as an idea, or even if not like a full lifestyle, at least something that you add to your arsenal for your family of things to do.
Right.
Right. And first and foremost, it enables you to not be part of a problem, but part of a solution during chaos. And further enables you, I mean, even if you're not faith-based or Christians like we are, it still enables you to serve your community instead of remove resources from your community in the catastrophic events.
Right.
Whether that be tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, storms, snowstorms, ice, or
fire.
Fire, which for us was a very real threat. Actually, fire is a very real threat really anywhere. Your house could burn down, even here in the South where we are now, it even though it's humid, fires still happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not like it was in California for sure.
Certainly not.
But
California's a tinderbox.
Yeah. Poor thing.
Poor California. And, where we lived up in Northern California, they were, 2 years in a row, devastated. Paradise.
Oh, yeah. They were terrible. Terrible, terrible.
They're still, as we interact with friends and family from up there, are still reeling from the economic and socioeconomic devastation of just those two fires in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And then add COVID to it now, and they're really struggling.
Yeah.
To rebuild. They started rebuilding, and then COVID happened, shut everything down again while they were in the get forward momentum. And because of it, they're once again calling and wanting to know, hey, what can we do? Because when it helps mitigate expenses. There's all kinds of benefits, right? Mm-hmm. So you had in your notes, I liked some of what I enjoy about having conversation with you is we have these two different perspectives. We have basically the mom and the dad perspective, if you will, or the guy and girl perspective. And I also felt or we, I say I felt because I keep bringing it up, but we felt that in the preparedness communities, there's a massive, massive vacuum of, quite frankly, the married couples and, the ladies' perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely women out there who are talking about preparedness, and but I would say that it's fair. It's fair to say that they're mostly men.
It certainly feels that way.
Yeah. Or at least on a simple Google search, typically you find a lot of men. Yeah.
Right. And it feels like almost all from a militarized, all the guys, it's I think we like to show off our guns and ammo and knives.
That is very possible.
And so, boy, howdy, it's lots of guns and ammo and knives, and feels like a lot less practical information. Trying to keep on course here with our notes. So what I'd said was, I enjoy having conversation with you about it because you will bring to me perspective that is dramatically different than anything I would think if it was just me by myself. I'd probably end up there at this militarized, and I'll forget or I'll neglect some of the simple things, some of the relational things. I'll become so doer and so headstrong in getting something accomplished and fixing something that I'll forget to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
And I'll burn.
Well, I do that too. But yeah. I do.
You do? In a different way than me, though.
Well, it could be in a different way, but I definitely do that too. Like, people are more important than agenda.
You have to tell yourself that.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I do too. I absolutely do too. And obviously it starts with each other and our families and then moves outward from there.
And I think it's just because we get excited. We get excited about ideas, and we want to jump off and take them. Although I will say that I really appreciate a very dear friend's analogy of our relationship.
Ours?
You and mine. And that was that, like, an idea is presented, and so Josh will just, he is running down the airplane to the hatch, just ready to leap. And I'm like, wait, don't forget your parachute. So I make sure that people have their parachutes on.
Absolutely.
Before they jump out of planes and then realize, oh, shoot.
I don't have a parachute. It doesn't have a ripcord. I'm not wearing sneakers.
And I'm going to die.
Yeah. Crap. That's 100% true, because you're so much more, I'm gung-ho, big dreams, lots of energy, rock and roll, that's ready, fire, aim a lot of the time. And then you have we have formed the ability to work together in tandem to bring order, have our I's dotted, our T's crossed, and implement a system.
Right. But at the same time, if I didn't have that kind of fuel, then I would be perfectly still. I don't know how much I would actually accomplish.
Well,
because I wouldn't.
I already know that you wouldn't be perfectly still. You would be also actively working. It's just you would be actively working on perfection and never accomplishing.
Yeah, that's probably quite possible. Yeah.
And
I love to plan and I love to organize. So I would plan and organize and plan and organize and plan and organize, and the execution would be very low.
Right. And with me, the execution was very low because I didn't plan or organize, and I would be constantly running the race and never getting to my destination as well. So
yeah,
teaming up together is always
we're teaming up.
Absolutely.
We're teaming up.
Mm-hmm. And so your perspective in your notes was to let other people know that. So number one, we'll just do a quick talk of topics that we want to talk about, or we'll be discussing and filming, but to give, and then we'll end on giving listeners, not some advice, but piece. For instance, okay. So what do we want to talk about then? what are topics and things that we will be exploring that are on our own minds, but then as we unpack, we'll invite people in to say, hey, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? Can you have this person on? So we hope that happens as well. But
definitely.
What's on your heart of topics to discuss and to teach? Obviously,
okay.
Education is
yeah. So definitely education. I homeschool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that we homeschool, but really I homeschool.
Right. Well,
I homeschool our children. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, I'll say this. Certainly, when it comes to the book part of education, the traditional,
the formal side of education is handled exclusively by me.
Yeah, and I give some minor reinforcement.
Yeah.
When it's necessary.
Yeah. So definitely education. I think COVID is an excellent example of this because I've kind of wondered, like, I don't know, how would education play a part in preparedness? But
now we know.
Now we know. This is an excellent litmus test for seeing what it looks like when your kids can't go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do? You know?
Right, how do you
now,
approach
obviously, the schools have been providing materials for the parents to use with their kids and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely want to talk more about that. And our own stories.
Mm-hmm.
Probably pulling a lot from our own stories.
Mostly.
And stories of people that we are friends with, close with, people that we personally know.
Mm-hmm.
And because I learn a lot by watching other people crash and burn.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So watch like, oh, wow.
Goodness, I'm
not doing that.
Right. Well, we have our closest friends are considerably more ready, fire, aim than even me, which has helped us out a lot in that, like, even when in my go for it drive, sometimes I get a little squirrely and don't want to move forward. And then our closest friends are like, what are you talking about? Let's go. And that helps us out a lot. But it also, helps us to expose, like, oh, well, we're deficient in this area, or maybe the relational dynamic changed here. We didn't know about it. And it helps tremendously.
Yeah, doing things with other people.
Absolutely.
You have their dynamic that you're bringing into it. And so, so it's our own stories, but other people's stories as well.
Sure.
That we've been in relationship with, or that we are in relationship with. There's health and wellness topics.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of health and wellness.
Which I know are passion of yours as well. I say I know. Goodness gracious, I'm saying it as though I'm interviewing you, but it is a huge passion of yours, and has challenged me to step up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I would not consider myself to be highly educated in this area, but I am definitely learning and continuing to gain knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Also, medical discussions.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I'd love to put out a YouTube video of me learning how to suture. That's one of my goals, is I want to learn how to suture. I feel like that's something that's really important, to have somebody around who knows how to suture. Right. So, buying the kit and figuring out how to do that.
In case it's necessary.
Right. Just in talking philosophy, we'll probably talk philosophy at some point.
Right.
What are some of the foundational tenets of where we're coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And talking about maybe some specific natural disasters. There's always finance.
Right.
Interviews. I'd love to bring a couple of experts on and interview them. People that are experts in their particular field or in their particular area. And
I 100% all of those things. I want to be able to define terminology for some new folks who are new to preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, there's lots of acronyms that get thrown around because, once again, it's become so militarized. So we can help define acronyms, terminology, philosophies on why. A lot of the other topics that I like would be personal defense and self-defense, hunting, camping, survival, and what finances. There's so many things that are that are all kind of all encompassing that we forget about. It's important that our finances are in order and that we're not just that we have a bigger picture, that we're not just living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, but we have a bit more control over our money, so that during this, so many people have been laid off, lost their job, their hours were cut,
Right.
during this COVID. Just that alone has made an economic disruption that people are reeling from, and it's not necessary. We've learned that that isn't necessary.
Right.
Our own personal health and wellness journey is part of it, and so all of these things are going to combine to hopefully create a more holistic approach, and we're approachable enough to really distill it down so that it's bite size, consumable, digestible for anybody, not just gung-ho hardcore. Now, this is not going to be a preparedness channel and podcast for people who are looking for highly advanced, very...
Correct. Yes. If you're wanting... advanced is a great word. If you're advanced in the preparedness game, you will be... You
may get frustrated.
Yeah, you might.
Yeah, you may get frustrated with how we're approaching. You may disagree with a lot of things we have to say. You may say, well, then there's this and that. Just know that, once again, our heart is to serve the uneducated, if you will. And not to say that in a demeaning way, but people who are wanting to get their feet wet, that's where...
They're just starting out.
Yeah. So in line with that, we want to make gear recommendations, maybe some gear reviews of things that we know work.
Oh yeah, well you would be great at that because you break everything.
I break everything. If it can survive me,
it will survive.
We know it's good because I'm so ridiculously hard on my own things, and to showcase maybe other people who are either on the fringes or deep within. We have friends who do things like make knives, who do a lot of hunting and fishing, who do lots of different ministry and so to have those people on and showcase them and pick their brain on what it is they're doing, because we know that the other fault or plot hole, if you will, we see within the preparedness communities is creating a lone island type mentality, right?
Right.
I'm doing all of this to hold, I'm doing all of this because me and my small immediate, I'm taking care of me and these 5 people. And that's not how you serve a community, like at all.
No. And we can definitely talk about that. We could talk about that in an entire podcast episode.
Probably 2 or 3, right.
Community, the importance of community historically.
Right.
And we can look at the importance of community historically and then apply that to today. Right.
So, this is just a small, tiny little sample. I know that we have, at least I have big dreams and aspirations for how much information there is to navigate and give. But we want to give some encouragement at the end to anybody who's listening. And in your notes, the encouragement was really good. I had actually forgotten to put something like that in there. But that is number 1, be okay with the journey. Be okay with where you're at now, with either starting out or maybe you've got a little bit going on and you're wanting to learn how to educate yourself. Be thankful and grateful.
Right. Because we are on a journey too.
Sure.
We don't have it all together. Mm-mm. We're not perfect. We're not experts. We're not,
right. Right.
But we're still constantly learning, but yet we do have knowledge and skills that we can turn around and offer to somebody who's beginning. So and start be small. Comfortable with where you are.
Yeah, be good with where you're at and start.
You want to set goals and you want to move forward, but don't panic. Don't freak out and think that you've got to have it all, by next month. That's just, not only is that not practical, but it's really not advisable, because you could go out and you could buy everything that you could ever need. And tomorrow you could go out and get it all, bring it home. And then you have lulled yourself into a false sense of security that you have all this stuff, when the reality is that you don't know heads or tails how to use any of it.
Right. Right. Exactly right. Which is not wise.
No.
Right?
So yeah, start small.
Yeah. Start small.
Add small.
Start small. Add small within your margin. Don't feel like, really, I think part of it is don't feel the need to compare yourself to us or anyone else.
Yeah, it's not a race. It's not a competition.
No.
That guy has more stuff than I do. Who cares?
Yeah. Like, seriously, who cares? Because any small item or philosophy or mentality or even spiritual principle that you add to your heart and your mind, or we'll just call it the arsenal of preparedness stuff, is any of it, no matter how small, is beneficial and will help you and someone else, right?
Yeah.
And we've just, to circle back, we've had the last decade or almost 20 years of thinking, praying, applying, working on these sorts of things. And so we are grateful to have the amenities, the resources to share with other people, and we would be remiss to not do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm looking forward to this particular part of our journey and doing this with you and with all of our listeners, and it's going to be fun.
I think so. I know so, actually, because it has been fun. It is now time to end the episode. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening.
I almost said tuning in, but it's not radio. But because of my age, I want to say thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, you just dated yourself.
That's all right.
But what can you do? You can't help it.
No, I'm the age I am, and I have to be okay with the journey.
Yeah, be okay with your journey.
I'm okay. All right. Well, thank you. We are going to consistently put out more and more, hopefully, quality material. Be blessed. Have a wonderful, wonderful day in all you do.
Yeah. Bye.